My family disgraced me for marrying a poor man. Now he's the mayor and I'm first lady. Please stay with me as I tell my story. And please, do not forget to support our channel by subscribing to our channel, liking our videos, and sharing your loved ones. Your support means the world to us. Now to our story. You are dead to us. My mom's voice cracked like a whip, sharp and final. She pointed to the door with trembling fingers, as if even the sight of me made her sick. My aunts, cousins, even my younger brother just stood there. No one said a word. No one stopped her. I was holding a small overnight bag, the one I had packed hours before. I had known it might come to this, but still, I hadn't expected her to say it in front of everyone. The shame burned worse than the tears I was holding back. All I had done was tell them I was engaged to Elijah, the kindest man I had ever met. He worked as a janitor by day and volunteered in the evenings, helping low-income families with food and legal paperwork. He had dreams of doing more, of running for office one day. But my family didn't see any of that. He's a nobody, my dad had scoffed. You think you're going to play poor and noble now? We didn't raise you for this garbage. My older sister, the one with the law degree and the Tesla, had burst out laughing. You're throwing away your entire future for a guy who probably can't even afford a wedding ring. He gave me one, I said quietly, holding out my hand. The ring wasn't flashy. It was small, with a thin band and a tiny stone. But it was real, and it meant everything. That made it worse. My mom stepped forward, looked me right in the eyes, and said it again. You're dead to us. Then she turned her back. Within 24 hours, I was out of their house. My bank account was frozen. They had opened it when I turned 18 and still had control. My name was quietly removed from our family's group chat, blocked from my mom's Facebook, disinvited from 3 weddings that year. I didn't even get the decency of a call. I moved in with Elijah the next day. He lived in a 1-bedroom apartment above a grocery store. The floors creaked, and the heat barely worked. But when he saw me crying on the couch that night, he wrapped his arms around me and said, "They might have given up on you, but I never will." We had nothing, but I had him. And somehow that was enough. Our apartment was small, but it was ours. The walls were thin, the ceiling leaked during heavy rain, and we had to jiggle the bathroom doorknob just right or it wouldn't open. But every night, we ate dinner together at a wobbly table that Elijah had rescued from a curb. Usually just ramen or rice and beans, sometimes with frozen veggies if we felt fancy. We didn't have much, but somehow we were always dreaming. Elijah would talk about opening a community center or running for city council. One day, he'd say, scribbling ideas in a beat-up notebook, I'll have a real platform, not just a folding chair at town hall. I'd roll my eyes and smile, not because I didn't believe him, but because I did. He worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night and stocking shelves in the mornings. In between, he'd volunteer wherever he could. Food pantries, community clinics, legal aid tables. He was always out there, listening to people, helping however he could. His name started to float around local Facebook groups, usually followed by "such a good man," or "wish more people cared like him." I picked up a job waitressing at a diner down the block. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept the lights on. The worst part was the people who recognized me. Old classmates, some of my mom's friends. They'd look at me, tilt their heads, and fake a little smile like I was a stray dog they felt bad for. "Oh, you work here now," one of them said, loud enough for the whole counter to hear. I just nodded and kept pouring her coffee. Elijah always knew when something like that happened. He'd see it on my face the moment I walked in. He'd pull me onto the couch, rub my back, and say, "I know it's hard now, but I swear it won't always be like this." Some evenings, we couldn't even afford a movie, so we'd take long walks through the city. We'd pass by parks, old buildings, and he'd start pointing at things. "If I were mayor," he'd say, "I'd fix that sidewalk first. And this corner? It needs lights. People don't feel safe here." I didn't laugh. Not anymore. Sometimes my family would drive by and see me outside. My sister in her fancy SUV. My mom once locked eyes with me at a crosswalk. She looked right through me, like I was invisible. But Elijah saw me. Every day. And slowly so did the city. The wedding invitation never came. Not that I expected one, but still it stung. My sister was getting married to some tech executive from San Francisco. The whole thing was all over social media. Designer dress fittings, beachside engagement photos, luxury bridal showers with custom cocktails. I watched it all unfold from my tiny kitchen while stirring a pot of instant mac and cheese. Then came the photos, sent to me by mistake, through a friend of my mom's, who claimed she didn't realize I was left off the guest list. They were glossy, professional shots. My sister in her lace gown, my parents beaming, champagne flowing. Attached was a note in my mom's handwriting. "This could have been you." I stared at those words so long my eyes went dry. Elijah found me sitting on the floor, the phone still in my hand. He didn't say anything at first, just pulled me up and sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulder. A few days later, I found out my dad had been talking about me behind my back. A mutual friend mentioned it casually, like it wasn't supposed to hurt. He said you've probably learned your lesson by now, that you chose a loser and now you're stuck. I laughed, but it wasn't real. It was the kind of laugh that has to come out, or else you'll cry. It didn't stop there. My Aunt Lisa, the one who always tried to act like she was neutral, called me out of nowhere. She started talking about my cousin's graduation, and then, out of nowhere, said, "You know, sweetie, your story really made the rounds in the family. Everyone uses it as kind of a warning. Like, don't end up like her." "Like what?" I asked, my voice flat. "You know, throwing everything away." I didn't reply. I just hung up. That night, Elijah came home and found me sitting in the dark. He asked what happened. I told him everything, about the wedding photos, the note, what my dad said, what my aunt said. All of it. He didn't get angry. He didn't try to fix it. He just looked at me with that calm, steady look of his and said quietly, "Let them laugh. One day, they won't be able to." I didn't know how he could still believe in that, believe in us. But I clung to his words like a lifeline, because even though it hurt like hell, I knew one thing for sure. I'd rather be poor with him than rich with them. It started small, just Elijah speaking at community meetings, usually with only a dozen people in the room. He'd stand up in his old button-down shirt and speak from the heart about things nobody else wanted to talk about. Rent hikes, broken streetlights, the school across town with no working heat in the winter. He didn't use big political words. He just talked like a neighbor, and people listened. Soon, word spread. More folks started showing up. Church leaders, single moms, store owners, all kinds of people. They trusted him because he showed up even when there weren't cameras. He stayed late to help elderly people fill out housing forms. He offered rides to meetings. He knew people by name. Local reporters took notice. One wrote an article titled, "The Janitor Who's Leading Change from the Ground Up." Another called him the most genuine voice in the city. A few weeks later, a radio host invited him for a live interview. He was nervous, but he nailed it. That night, he sat on our couch holding my hand and said, "I think I'm going to run for city council." I paused. "Are you serious?" He nodded. "I've thought about it for months. I think we can actually do this." We. Not just him. Us. I became his campaign manager, fundraiser, event planner, and pep talker, all rolled into one. We made flyers at the library and passed them out ourselves. I built a website on an old laptop. We ate granola bars in the car between events. Every day was chaos, but we worked like we were made for it. People kept showing up. People believed in him the way I always had. And then he won. Not just by a little, by a landslide. He crushed the incumbent who had been in office for over a decade. The victory party wasn't fancy, just a rented church hall filled with folding chairs and plastic cups. But the energy was electric. Neighbors hugged us. A kid ran up and said, "You're going to fix my school, right?" Elijah smiled and said, "I'll do everything I can." A few days later, my phone buzzed with a message from a cousin I hadn't heard from in years. Just a screenshot of a Google search with Elijah's name at the top and the words, "Is this your husband?" I didn't reply, but I smiled, because now they knew. It had been over a year since I'd seen my sister in person. So when I looked up from wiping a table and saw her standing near the diner entrance in a cream blazer and high heels that didn't belong anywhere near linoleum floors, I froze. She gave me a small wave, like we were old friends running into each other by chance. I didn't wave back. "Can we talk?" she asked, already sliding into a booth before I could answer. I glanced at my manager, who nodded from the counter. Reluctantly, I walked over and sat across from her. She smiled like she was doing me a favor. "You look well. Busier than usual." I didn't bother pretending. "What do you want?" She leaned in. "Just a little sisterly advice. Don't get too comfortable with all of this. The attention, the cameras, the first lady thing." I stared at her, unsure if I'd heard her right. She went on. "Politics chews up nobodies. It loves underdogs, until it doesn't. One mistake and poof. He's gone. And you? You'll be right back here refilling coffee for tips." There was a flicker of something behind her eyes, maybe jealousy, maybe fear. Either way, she wasn't here out of concern. "Elijah's not in this for attention," I said quietly. She smirked. "Please. He's using your sad little backstory to look like a hero. It's smart, honestly, but it's a phase. Eventually, people will want someone real." I stood up. "We're done here." She didn't stop me, just flipped her hair, stood, and walked out like she owned the place. That night, I didn't tell Elijah right away, but he could tell something was off. "You okay?" he asked as we curled up on the couch. I hesitated. Then I told him everything. Every word she said, every smug look, every dig at who we were. He didn't flinch. He didn't get angry. Instead, he reached over, took my hand, and said calmly, "They're scared now. That's all this is." I stared at him. "You really think so?" He nodded. "They thought we'd fail. That you'd come crawling back. And now they're realizing you never needed them. For the first time in a long time, I believed it too. She didn't come to my job again. But even if she had, I wasn't scared of her anymore. When Elijah told me he wanted to run for mayor, I actually laughed at first. Not because I didn't believe in him. I did, more than anyone, but because I knew exactly how people would react. They're going to laugh at you, I said. He smiled. They already do. Might as well give them a reason. A week later, he announced it at a community rally. Just said it plain and proud into the mic. I'm running for mayor. The crowd went silent for half a second, then erupted into cheers. But outside that park, it was a different story. Local political elites brushed it off. Former city officials rolled their eyes in interviews, calling it cute. One news anchor actually chuckled live on air while reporting the announcement. A janitor turned city councilman wants to run the city now, he said with a grin. Ambitious. Then came my parents. They didn't message me directly, of course not, but I saw the post. A picture of Elijah speaking at his campaign launch, paired with my dad's caption. Should we start collecting food stamps now or wait until he bankrupts the whole city? The comments were even worse. Some were from relatives, some from family friends who used to pinch my cheeks and ask about college. Now they were joking about how far I'd fallen. But Elijah didn't let it shake him. And because he didn't, I wouldn't either. We dove in headfirst. We turned our apartment into campaign HQ. I made spreadsheets and phone calls while he planned speeches and walked neighborhood. We scraped together every dollar we could for flyers, buttons, signs. Anything that didn't feel like a joke next to the big budget campaigns we were up against. We knocked on doors until our knuckles were sore. Some slammed in our faces. But most didn't. Most listened. And more than a few said, finally, someone who gets it. The other candidates wore suits, spoke in polished sound bites, and made vague promises. Elijah wore his same scuffed sneakers and told the truth. People loved him for it. The newspapers stopped mocking and started paying attention. One headline read, "The mayor we didn't expect, but might just need." He became more than a candidate. He became a symbol of working people, of honesty, of the idea that politics didn't belong only to the rich and well-connected. And every night, when we sat at our tiny table eating takeout and planning the next day, I saw it in his eyes. He wasn't running for attention. He was running because no one else would. Election night felt like any other night, quiet, tense, and weirdly calm. We didn't throw a party. We didn't have balloons or a watch party at a fancy hotel. We just stayed home, sitting on our worn-out couch, eating cold pizza, refreshing the election website on Elijah's old laptop every few minutes. Neither of us said it out loud, but we both thought the same thing. We probably lost. Still, we were proud. We'd done everything we could. He had told the truth. We hadn't sold out. We hadn't taken money from shady donors or fake endorsements. We gave them our best shot, Elijah said softly, reaching for my hand. That's all I ever wanted. And then the numbers started rolling in. First, it was 1 precinct, then 3, then 10. Elijah was leading. By a lot. We both just stared at the screen, frozen. He kept refreshing like it had to be a mistake. But the gap only kept growing. Then we heard it, a car horn outside. Then another. We looked out the window and saw a line of cars honking and waving. Some people were literally dancing in the street. Someone had written Mayor Elijah in chalk on the sidewalk. A few minutes later, reporters started showing up. Cameras, microphones, people knocking on our door asking, "How does it feel?" It felt unreal. By midnight, it was official. Elijah had won. Not just won, he crushed the competition. The final numbers weren't even close. He stood in our living room, still wearing his usual hoodie and sneakers, and gave a speech to the camera crews standing between our kitchen chairs. I stood beside him, hands shaking, smiling so wide my face hurt. That night, I became First Lady of the city. I didn't even know what that meant yet, but I knew it was real. And then my phone buzzed, over and over. Texts from old coworkers, classmates, people who hadn't said a word to me in years. All saying, "Congratulations." And I always knew he'd do something big, but one name made me freeze. Mom. I opened the message. Just a simple line. "Proud of you both. Maybe we can talk soon." I stared at it for a long time. After everything. After being called dead to them. After being mocked, cut off, erased. Now she wanted to talk. I put the phone down and looked at Elijah. He didn't say anything. Just pulled me into a quiet hug while people cheered outside. It didn't take long after the election win for the masks to start coming off. My mom called me a week later, like nothing had ever happened. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice syrupy and fake. "We always knew you two were meant for something big." I almost dropped the phone from laughing. I reminded her of the day she screamed at me in front of the whole family, of the note she sent with the wedding photos, of how she blocked me on every platform and told people I was a cautionary tale. She ignored all of it. "That was a different time," she said. "We were just worried about you. We didn't know him yet." Right. Then my dad messaged Elijah directly, a single line. Any chance we could visit City Hall sometime? Might be nice to reconnect. No apology. No acknowledgement of the years of silence, the mocking, the way he told everyone I had thrown my life away. Just a casual request. Like we were old friends catching up. And then my sister. She sent me a picture of herself at some networking event, arm around a political consultant. The caption said, "Thinking of getting into the game myself. Could be fun to team up. Let's chat." Like we were just two women in power, sharing a moment. I didn't even respond to her. To my mom, I replied with just one sentence. "You made it clear I was dead to you, so stay buried." It felt cold, but it felt right. For years, I'd begged for their approval. I cried over their silence, replayed every cruel thing they said, hoped they'd someday see what I saw in Elijah. Now that everyone else did, now that the city believed in him, in us, they wanted back in. But they didn't get to walk in and pretend it never happened. That night, I showed Elijah the messages. He didn't tell me to forgive them. He didn't say, "They're still your family." He just looked at me and said, "We don't need them. You, me, we're the family now." And he was right. We built this life from nothing, from secondhand furniture and dollar store meals, and being laughed out of room. They didn't believe in us then. They don't get to enjoy it. Now, the gala was unlike anything we'd ever seen. It was our first official mayoral event, a fundraiser, a celebration, and a statement all rolled into one. City Hall rented out the ballroom at the historic downtown hotel. Celebrities flew in. Reporters lined the red carpet. Local leaders, community organizers, activists. Everyone who had supported Elijah from day one was there. I wore a custom dress, deep blue satin with hand-stitched embroidery. A local designer made it for me as a gift. When I stepped out of the car, cameras flashed, people clapped, and someone shouted, "First Lady of the City." I smiled, not because of the attention, but because we had done this our way. No shortcuts. No help from the people who tried to erase us. Inside, the music played, glasses clinked, and speeches were made. Elijah stood under the soft lights and spoke about change, hope, and serving people with honesty. I stood beside him, proud, calm, collected. And then I heard the commotion outside. At first, I thought it was press drama, but a staffer walked over, whispering something that made me freeze for a second. My mom, dad, and sister were outside. They hadn't been invited. Not because we were being petty, but because we knew who they really were and what they were capable of. And this night wasn't for people who only showed up once the cameras. Apparently, they thought they could just walk in. Security stopped them at the door. They argued, said their names like it meant something. My mom raised her voice, told the guard she was the mayor's mother-in-law. When that didn't work, she begged. Someone recorded it, her voice desperate and cracking, pleading, "Please, I just want to see my daughter." It went viral before the gala was even over. I watched the clip in the hallway outside the ballroom, phone in hand, heart strangely still. People sent it to me, asked if I wanted to comment. I didn't. I didn't gloat. I didn't post a response or say karma, or try to rub it in. But I felt something inside me settle. Not revenge, not triumph, just finality. That door, the one they slammed in my face when I was 22, carrying a bag and a ring from a man they called worthless, it had closed for good. And I was okay with that. Sometimes I sit in our kitchen, the new one, in the mayor's house, with marble counters and big windows, and think about that night my mom threw me out. I remember the suitcase, the yelling, the way no one looked at me as I walked out. I remember thinking my whole life had ended. I didn't know it was just beginning. Now I have peace. I have a home full of laughter and love. I have a husband who wakes up every day ready to fight for people who don't have a voice. He's already passed housing reforms, fixed the lights in those dark corners he used to point at, and started a program for after-school meals in the same neighborhoods we used to live in. He's not doing it for headline. He's doing it because he said he would. And I get to stand beside him every day and watch him become exactly who he said he'd be. Old friends who once ghosted me now send texts. "So proud of you. Let's catch up sometime." Some even drop by City Hall, pretending we were always close. I smile, nod, make small talk, but I keep a distance. They made their choice. So did I. People ask me if I ever regret how it all happened. If I miss my family, the money, the old life. The truth is I don't. I regret one thing, that I didn't walk away sooner. That I spent so long trying to earn their love, their approval, when all they ever wanted was control. Now, I don't need their love. I have something better. I have a partner who saw me when I had nothing and never once made me feel like less. I have a marriage built on struggle, faith, and hard work. I have a city that sees us not as a fairy tale, but as proof that real change is possible when you don't quit. I used to think winning meant making them proud. Now I know better. Winning is waking up every morning knowing I'm living the life I chose. When you choose love over greed, you don't just win, you build something unbreakable. You build a future with roots too deep to be shaken. They lost me forever the day they made me choose. I chose right.